So today we're going to be talking about gas. So no, but seriously, I don't think I've ever truly told this story completely from start to finish. I've told people bits and pieces of it, but yeah, I'm gonna get into the time that I legit almost died. I'm like dead serious. No pun intended. Um, but this will probably be a two-part episode just so I can like cover everything. I don't want to really rush through it. So we're going to talk about the time I almost died. When I turned 30, I make a joke to everybody now that once you turn 30, it all goes downhill, which it did for me for a bit. um, Life was going good. I had a surprise 30th birthday party thrown by my wife. Um, it was really cool. I was completely shocked. I had just done the Goggins challenge, the 48-hour challenge, which for those that don't know, that's where you do 4 miles every 4 hours, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's honestly the mental exhaustion of doing it was the hardest part. And I did it, I think, 2 weeks before I turned 30. It was a goal of mine that I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. And damn, did I pick a horrible weekend to start it. I started it on a Friday evening and I finished up on a Sunday afternoon. I did it over the weekend so I could try to recover for work come Monday. But I remember starting Friday night, solid. And that weekend, I don't think it snowed, but it was cold enough that it could have snowed. It poured down rain at one point, which I did it completely outside. And yeah, it was a hell of a trip. I even worked out that Saturday. But come Sunday, I was completely exhausted, just dead, because it got to a point where you just can't get any sleep because you're so like amped up doing it and your brain just can't think straight. I could not sleep. So, but anyways, life was going pretty well. I was doing sled hockey at the time. Um, was in a good job. Life was looking good. And unfortunately, these kind of setbacks seem like they always come after life is going pretty well. So, with my mentality now, I try not to live life like that because it feels like you kind of set yourself up. So, I just kind of take things as they come and just, like it is what it is. We'll get through this. It just makes processing things so much easier to process them like that. But so I can remember very vividly um, my wife and I were on the golf course. So she was golfing. It was a beautiful day. Like the weather was perfect. It was on a Sunday. We're just having the times of our lives. And, life is going. I'm like, man, this is a great day. And then Monday, I remember waking up basically with a fever. Now, anytime I ever get a fever, I try to really focus on like, why do I have a fever? Because being a paraplegic, you can't read your body like a lot of people can, especially my feeling stops chest line, so you really have to dig into what's going on with your body. And I remember, so I self cath, paraplegic, it's how I pee. And I remember that my urine was discolored, which, self cathing, I always keep an eye on my urine and all that. Just a part of it. You got to be proactive about those things. That's a lot of experience that goes into it. But um, I felt like I had a bit of a urinary tract infection. So I've always known to make sure I stay hydrated. um, when you feel that there's an infection coming on, water, cranberry juice, all that, like flush the system. And day two, I noticed it wasn't getting better. So I went to the doctor. It's a Tuesday. I went to the doctor and basically they were like, no, everything's good. There's nothing in the urine. You're good. So I'm like, okay. I don't remember if they put me on anything. I feel like they put me on an antibiotic, but I don't remember for sure. But come Wednesday, fever's still there. To the point now where I believe I'm getting migraines and I have a bad fever. I'm like, okay, call the doctor. I found blood in my urine, but my urine was still clear. So that's why I was kind of like, what the hell's going on? They're like, well, you found blood in your urine. Fever's not going away. Well, first they told me to take Tylenol, which I'm like, I don't really believe in Tylenol just because it just masks the fever. It doesn't fix it. It just masks it. For those of you who don't know that, Tylenol does not fix a fever. All it does is mask it. So they're like, yeah, you need to go to the ER. So I remember going to the ER and I felt like complete shit. Um, I drove myself there and it was a struggle just to get through the fucking door. Like literally to get through the sliding doors of the ER, I'm like, holy shit, I feel like I'm gonna die right now. Because I had been laying around for a couple days. I stayed home from work, just because of this. I wasn't feeling well. And um I barely got into the doors. Like I remember like it was like a struggle, like breathing, and I'm like sitting there thinking like I don't know how I even did this. And this was right around 2021, so that was back when we had to wear masks and stuff in the hospitals. But I remember they took my vitals. My vitals were way off, like to the point that they're like questioning like that this is not good. My blood pressure was really low. Um, and then they admitted me, run some tests, figure out what's going on with me. I called my wife, and then they wanted a urinary. They wanted me to do a urine sample. I remember that urine sample looked like it's gonna be really gross. It literally was like brown. It was disgusting, and of course, this like threw me for a spin because I was like, wait a minute, like I did a urine sample at my primary doctor, and they were like, "No, your urine's fine." Here we are, and it was disgusting. And I remember seeing the nurse, like she saw it, and like even she was like in shock of what she saw. And I remember the first. I don't know if she was a nurse. I don't know what she was, but she didn't hook me up to like any like the vital stuff, and my wife was like, aren't you gonna hook him up? She's like, oh no. And then a nurse came in, she's like, no, we definitely need to hook him up. And I remember seeing the look on the nurse's face when she saw how low my blood pressure was. Just seeing the look on her face, we knew it was bad. um Early on we didn't realize how bad this was until later on, but I remember the head nurse came in, like after they took some blood work. Um, after the urine sample, they ran everything, and the nurse came in, and the look on her face said, like, "This is really bad." I'm in the ER, and like a place where they see this kind of stuff all the time, and it told me that this was very serious. And she told us basically, you are sepsis. Um, you know, we think your kidney's holding lots of water. It looks like your infection has gone up further into the kidney and it's caused a blockage. And she was like, this is really bad. Like, you're in bad shape right now. And she said that we cannot do anything for you here at this hospital. They were not, they, what they wanted to do was they needed to drain the kidney. Um, Later on, we found out I was holding probably over 20 pounds of water in my left kidney. So they wanted to drain the kidney, which they could not do it at that hospital. And they said, you're not stable enough to go by ambulance. You have to be life flighted. And like it got serious very quickly. From the point that I came through the door, within an hour, it was this serious. And they said, we're calling a life flight. Life flight will be here. And I remember looking at my wife, like, and like we realized like this is bad, like this is really bad, after seeing like the nurse and seeing how frantic they were and like moving around and stuff, like this was serious. And I remember just breaking down. like thinking like, holy shit, like, you know, things were going so well. And then like out of nowhere, this hit me. And I'm like, shit, am I gonna like die? Am I gonna pull through this? Like, this is really bad. And I remember waiting for the life flight. I waited hours, fucking hours for a life flight. Like, which you wouldn't think it would take that long for a helicopter to get there. But I remember waiting there, and of course, they keep hospitals pretty cold to keep away infection and bacteria and stuff. But I remember waiting, and they continue to put warm blankets on me, and I probably had 5 or 6, like, hot blankets on me, and I was shaking like there was nothing on me, like, shaking to the point that, like, I was literally, like, shaking. Like, I started to go into shock, like, waiting for the helicopter, like, the infection was, like, really taking over. I remember they gave me this, liquid Tylenol, which if you ever get the chance to have that stuff, it is good shit, because it brought, like, a warm, fuzzy feeling over me while waiting for this helicopter. And I remember, getting on the helicopter, just like thinking, like, just kind of like playing everything through my head of like, life and like what was going on and like how quickly things have took a turn. And so they got me down to the other hospital in Pittsburgh. My wife met me down there. Her and her grandma drove down, which I don't know how she drove because she was a wreck. I mean, it was bad. And it was probably 10 or 11 o'clock at night, I believe, is when they were able to, like, they had a team waiting for me to put this drain in, to relieve the kidney to get all that fluid out of there. And so they put the drain in. I was in the ER or I'm sorry, I was in intensive care for 3 days at that hospital. It was a training hospital, which honestly is probably one of the best hospitals to go to in Pittsburgh, just because, that's, their training. So they want to be like the best of the best kind of deal. And so I'm in the intensive care unit, and it was so bad to the point that like I had so much water that you couldn't even find veins in my arms, like, which I'm usually pretty like it's pretty easy to pull blood from me. But this was the first time ever that they struggled to pull blood from me. It was to the point that I remember they kept like poking me. The nurse kept poking me, and it was to the point that like it was literally making me anxious. Like I was like nervous, her trying to like get blood because she kept doing it over and over to the point that like I kept setting off the alarm thing. My oxygen level kept going down because I kept stop breathing, like I kept holding my breath. And it was to the point that she was like, I can't get blood from you. So they had to bring in phlebotomist. So they, for phlebotomy, I'm sorry, I'm terrible with medical terms. So she came up, she got blood like instantly. And I will say that like pulling blood from me incident, that like fucked me up for like probably 3 or 4 years, like to the point that every time I gave blood, it like made me nervous. Like it like stuck with me for years. To the point that like I couldn't look. I had to look away, which I know a lot of people are like that, but it was to the point that like literally my heart rate would start to go up every time I had to give blood. And it was like it was bad. So um, I'm in the ER or intensive care. I remember just laying there and just kind of like, man, here we are again. Another major setback. And so they released me 3 days later. Basically, I left there with a drain in the kidney, which I think it was a pain in the ass, man, because where it was at, it was on my left side. And I was pretty big. I think I was over 200, but no, I wasn't. I was really light because this was right around when I was playing sled hockey, so I was super light. But it was sticking out to the point that it would almost hit my tire on my wheelchair, and like it made transferring a pain in the ass just because that thing stuck out. I had to have a new one put in, I think 2 or 3 times because it kept getting moved or it wouldn't drain because I would bump it. And, like I went back to work, like I was still working, I had this drain in. I think after about, I went back to work, I think after about 3 days after leaving intensive care. And, but yeah, this drain just stuck out. So it was just a constant pain in the ass. And like my, like guards that I have on the side of my chair, looking at my chair right now, and it would like bump into that. So it'd constantly rub on that. Um, I went back to the gym. I was back in a gym within 6 or 7 days. Um, just I'm not going to quit. They basically said you can go back to your activities. Just make sure that you're keeping it light. Don't do anything crazy right off the bat. You know, so I started lifting again. And then of course sled hockey. It was hard because I really enjoyed the sport of sled hockey. I loved it. I felt like it was a good sport for me because I'm an aggressive person. I like aggression. I think that's what one of the things that drew me to the sport of powerlifting. Um, the fact that you can just like give it your all and just let loose, and I loved it. I loved how aggressive it was. I loved the hitting and the checking people. I loved everything about it. But with my kidney situation, we didn't know what the future held. There was talk of, we don't know how much damage is done on your kidney. You may have to have the kidney taken out. And so there was a lot. And, I made the decision that it was probably best for me to hang it up from sled hockey. Um, just because with it being a high impact sport, we didn't know, if this kidney is damaged, I don't want to damage it more. Or if I end up losing this kidney, I don't want to be taking impacts to my right kidney, or like, I don't want that to like the possibility of that getting affected, because this was such a serious situation already that I knew that that was best for me. And it was hard giving that sport up because, like I said, I really enjoyed it. I really, I mean, I feel that I'm the type of person that when I find a hobby or a sport, like I race RC cars. I was to the point that I like had sponsorships. I traveled. I did that for I think 4 or 5 years, and then I was a competitive shooter when I was in high school up until right when I got into college. I did that for 6 or 7 years. So any type of sport or activity that like I truly fall in love with, I go all in. I completely devote myself to the point that like it almost becomes an obsession, you know. And I did the same thing with sled hockey. That my first sled, um, it was funded through the Mighty Pens, or I'm sorry, the Mew Center, the Pittsburgh Penguins. It was, the funding was through it. So my first sled I used was theirs, and then as I did it for a little bit, I wanted to get my own sled that was more competitive. One that I could make more adjustments to. I got carbon fiber sticks. I had a setup in my garage for puck work. I had a wheel kit made. Like I went all in on this sport. I would do it 4 or 5 times a week, and just like I was gone, I was like, man, I have to hang it up. But I knew my health was more important. Focusing on the future with this kidney, I knew that I needed to worry about that first, and then kind of like go from there. If I wanted to do something afterwards, I would do that after. So I had the kidney taken out, or skipping ahead there. So it was probably, I'm trying to think. That happened. Basically, I went to a urologist in Monroeville. Um, which I wish we would have did a little more research on his um just his practice. He was um I've never met a doctor like this dude before. Literally, I remember this dude come walking in. He had a full on suit and like I looked down at his shoes. This dude looked like a fucking mob boss. Like he even talked like one. It was wild. And the first thing out of this dude's mouth was basically he's worried about my testosterone levels. That he wants me to get tested for my testosterone levels. Which, first off, we waited in this doctor's office. I'm not joking. We waited for probably almost 3 hours to get seen by this dude, and his practice was a complete shit show. His staff had no idea what the fuck was going on. It was complete chaos. It was just wild. Which, honestly, looking back, that was like a sign that, like, just get out of here, just go find another doctor. This dude was fucking terrible. Um, yeah, he wanted to. He was worried about my testosterone levels, which I'm like, bro, you're worried about my test levels. Like, I'm worried about my kidney. Like, what is going to happen with this kidney? You know what I mean? Like, and he was like, yeah, we'll get to that. You know, like he's like talking like that and stuff. So, I seen him the first time, and he was like really scaring us. Like his bedside manners were terrible. Like he's like talking about like my testosterone levels. Like you might not be able to have kids. I'm like, kids? You think I'm worried about having kids right now? Like, dude, I almost died. Like, I mean, it'd been a couple months. I'm like, I nearly died from this. Like, I very close to being dead. And this dude's worried about me having children at the time. So, I went and had a kidney function test done, and they found that my left kidney was only functioning at like 10%, which was devastating. I mean, it really was devastating because, in the back of my head, I try to be a pretty positive person. I'm a realist, but also I try to be positive. As long as I can find that positivity, which I try to find it in every situation, no matter how bad something gets, I still try to see the silver lining to something. And yeah, they found that 10% is what the kidney was functioning at. So basically, I went back to him and he was like, yeah, your kidney's not functioning enough to make it worthwhile to keep in. And honestly, after seeing him a couple times, we're like, I don't know if we believe you. Like, yeah, that might be true, but at the time, like just seeing how this dude operates and seeing how his practice operates, like we need a second opinion. And so we were like, we're done with this dude. And then I remember researching this guy like afterwards. We found out that this dude like had been sued multiple times. Um, Multiple people on his review said that his primary focus was selling you testosterone stuff. And it made sense because we're like, well, no shit. Like, no wonder this dude was so worried about that. Like, this dude he's just making money off of this stuff. Like, this dude doesn't give a fuck. You know what I mean? Like, and we found out that he doesn't even do these surgeries. Like, he was like, oh, I can't take a kidney out. You'd have to have somebody else do it. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Why am I going to you, bro? Like, um, what is the point of even seeing this guy? So we decided that it would be best to get a second opinion, and we did some looking around, and I ended it up at there was a hospital. I ended up at Allegheny General. There was a urologist over near that hospital that I ended up going to, and honestly, this dude was phenomenal. He was really good. um he was very down to earth, but he was very like intelligent, and he was so much better. And I went and did another test, and they confirmed that yeah, kidney's only functioning like 10%. It's going to be best to have the kidney taken out. And of course, that was still devastating. Um, After being told this twice now, I'm like, damn, like I had to face the fact that like you're gonna have to have this kidney taken out because of this infection. Like it was just like a domino effect. It started out with infection, it went up into the kidney. When it did that, it basically it stopped draining and it damaged your kidney. That's what caused it. And unfortunately, that is one of the biggest things for people that self cath. Infection is very likely. That's why it is so important to make sure that, like, you're going to the bathroom, that everything's clean, your hands are clean, all that. Um, you're always drinking enough water. It's very important to make sure you're flushing your system. Try to avoid a lot of other like stuff that's not water, just because, you know, as a paraplegic, you're so much more prone to a urinary tract infection because there's so much more bacteria in the area. So yeah, I had to have the kidney taken out. And I think I'm gonna stop it here just because I wanna, take my time with this and like really talk it through. But I hope you join me on the next episode where I'm gonna continue to talk about having my kidney taken out. So I'm gonna stop there. Um, don't forget to follow along on, social media. Don't forget to follow It's Stitch Time, my whatever podcast app you listen to this on. And with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go get some food because I'm starving. But as I always say, adapt, overcome, and conquer. Till next time, guys. Later.